if you're the parent of a high school football player and you'd like to see what level your son has the best chance of getting a scholarship in right now. And again, all of this we're saying is with the assumption that your son's doing everything that we teach, right? The marketing side, the posting, the social media, the outreach to these coaches, all of that matters. But the reason we evaluate highlight videos is because if you're not reaching out to the right divisions and the right schools, everything else we teach won't work. Right. So this is the first and most important piece. How to get a college football scholarship, a series where we evaluate active high school football players, break down their game film, let them know at the end what division they have the best chance of earning a scholarship in. And lastly, and most importantly, let them know what they need to do to get to the next level. And joining me today is our head coach here at Next Play, Brian Overton, who has over 15 years of Division I recruiting experience. And if you'd like to see if your son meets the criteria for a professional evaluation, I'll leave a link right in the description below. So Brian, break us down. Who do we have today and who are we evaluating? Break us down.
So I got a really talented young offensive lineman here, 2027. He's about,
Nice.
I'm going to say 6'4", 6'5", probably right at 300 pounds is what I'm seeing on the tape. I'm ballparking that, but I feel pretty confident that he's close to 300 pounds.
So we got a big ugly
Good.
in here. A nice big
Huh?
ugly, huh? A little
Yeah.
big ugly up in here. Okay.
Yeah. Young, really good young player. Obviously great size. So he's got almost a 2-minute highlight, which is a solid time, for a 2027 offensive lineman. Sometimes lineman plays, especially on the offensive side of the ball, are harder to grab and are usually not very lengthy, really, to be honest with you. So that's a good amount of time and a good amount of clips for a 2027. We didn't have him take any of them out, so I won't have to show any that we asked him to take out. And I also like the order of his plays because, and I explained this to him in the notes in the evaluation and on the voiceover. I'm okay with the order of plays right now because of the length of the tape. I think it has a good mix of traits in there that translate to college ball. So I wasn't really pressed on shuffling them all around because I thought it was a good mixture in there. So we didn't do a lot of play shuffling on there. So when we hit it, I'll just let it run and we'll talk about it as we go. But I did have him add an information slide in there. Again, much like 95% of the ones we do, I had him get started on his information slide. So when they open this up for them, it's coming up for these 27s here in the summer. Where they're going to be able to start reaching out to them. I want him to be ready, locked and loaded. When he gets the tape out, for them to have all the information, to either put him on the board and start a profile on him, or actually when it comes that time to actually reach out to him. So,
Yeah.
really good player.
Yeah. Okay. All
So
right,
we're
cool.
just going to let it roll here and talk about it as we go. He's playing right tackle for his team. I'll talk about that a little bit further towards the end. But just some things that stood out to me early on. As you go along here, he's the guy that's going to really crush you and then help you up. So he's got a nice side to him as well. But I love how he gets off the ball. He had some double teams on there. Playing half man, which I liked early on in the tape. You can
Okay.
see there him, reaching back and getting that guy that's redirecting. I love his nastiness, the way he finishes blocks. He's got some hand placement stuff, that, again, I'll talk about at the end. But be the big athlete like that, he runs really well. You can see the nastiness there on the end, finishing that block as well. So I really like his athletic ability. He's got a few like semi pass sets like that one, where he showed his power and just kind of eliminated the guy, just getting his hands on him. Love this play right here. You've got a screen here into the boundary. He can't find anybody, so he turns around and he makes sure he finds work. You know what I mean? This is a high
Yeah.
football IQ play here. When he gets out there and everybody's gone, he finds somebody and gets some work in there. Really like that play there. Again, shows high football IQ. And I love these ones where he's getting out on the perimeter like that and showing his athletic ability. He's got decent power already, as a young player. Like this play here. This one translates to college ball with him running on this stretch play right here. getting his hand on this guy, and just being able to stay in front of him. Okay, if you know what you're looking at here, this guy didn't run by him and he didn't run through him. Now he gave a little bit of ground. Okay, but that was a really good play there for them to coach off of. So his athletic ability stands out. I like his nastiness at the end of plays.
Yeah, that's my big.
He bends fairly well, but again, we'll talk about that here in a second. You can see him getting up on the second level defender here, which I like. Getting a piece of the guy, inside of him, and then getting up to the linebacker, taking two away there. So he's got some really good stuff on here as a young player.
So let's talk about the nastiness, right? Because you hear that a lot on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
So from a college coach's standpoint, what are you looking for nastiness? Like what specifically are you looking for? Because if I'm an offensive lineman, I want to know what I could do to show that on tape more.
Yeah, and it's usually when you see it the most is like when you're finishing blocks. Like when they're going to the ground. It's really a finishing technique. Where you're not just okay with them being blocked and you being in between them and the ball carrier. You're really trying to finish them through the ground. And make sure that they can't pop up and make the play. So that last little piece on the end. I think it's I think an example of it. Is here on this play right here that we've got running. Watch how he gets the initial block. See that second hit right there? That second little get in there. I'm going to make sure you're blocked, because that shows a mentality. It shows a nastiness that you need in there that sometimes is hard to coach. Like, you can get kids better at it, you know what I mean? But if they have it at a young age, and when I say young age, I don't care. This is really young, 2027. But even if they have it as a senior, in high school, then it's something that you don't have to worry about when they get there. They have the nastiness, to want to do it. And so if you can clean up all the other stuff, it's just a trait that you have to be really successful in there. I truly believe that. You got to have some nastiness to you in college football to survive in the box and there on either side of the ball.
Yeah, and for his size too, you said roughly 6'4", 6'5", 300. The ability to bend. Walk me through that, because that's obviously
Yeah.
a really important,
Yep.
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. So he bends really well. For a young kid. And so I would, well, I take that back. I wouldn't say really well. He bends well for a kid his size and his age. Okay. So the reason it's important is, when you get into the college level, and especially if you're a bigger guy like he is, when you get up and start playing, college ball, everybody's, obviously, everybody's bigger, faster, and stronger, right? And so as an offensive lineman, and we talk about it a lot when we do offensive linemen. Some are waist benders, and bending over forward at the waist, which is not good, because then you lose your power, you lose your ability to move and operate. Whereas if you're a knee bender, and at that size can really get your pads underneath you, it makes a huge difference. So being able to, flexibly bend, and get under blocks and drive blocks and things like that is critically
Yeah.
important. The stiffer those guys are, and even getting out of their stance, bending, even when you're in 3-point stance, people are, some people will say, well, they're already bent over at the waist, because they're in a 3-point stance. Yes, they are, but take notice to the really good ones. When in that 3-point stance, that back end is down. That back end is a little further down. And that head and those shoulders are up even when they're in the stance, because they're really good. They can bend. They can bend
Right.
down there, and they can get that body down there like that to get in a good position, even in a 3-point stance. If you're not very flexible and can't bend, you have to do nothing but bend over at the waist, which drops your head and it drops your pad level immediately in your stance. So when you hear us talking about bending at the offensive line position, that's why it just, position. The position you're in, whether you're in your stance or whether you're pass blocking or run blocking, as far as the run fits, how you engage with the defensive lineman, again, whether it's a play inside the box or whether you're, getting on the perimeter like he is, all that matters. And, not only bending, the flexibility and bending, kind of go hand in hand, with that, and it makes you a better athlete. And he's already a decent athlete, you know what I mean? At 300 pounds, you can see him running out here on the perimeter 3 or 4 times, and being able to engage in younger, excuse me, not younger, smaller guys.
Yeah.
So those are critically important, and I think that's why I didn't do a whole lot to the tape, because I think as a young player, with just under 2 minutes, I think it was a good mix in there, in the
Yeah.
way the plays were mixed in there, and I didn't think, I only move plays around if I think it really moves the needle when coaches are watching it, and as I watched that right there, I think the way he has it mixed in there will keep them intrigued, all the way through there, because it is a nice mix in there, of his
Yeah.
distinguishing characteristics.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. And so the big reveal, what division does he have the best chance of getting a
So being
scholarship
a
in?
2027, a young player with that kind of size, I really like his tape right now, to be targeting, for sure, Division II and FCS. Again, they'll hear me say this a lot on here. That is a really high grade for a sophomore, but it factors in with his grade level. It also factors in his size, and his position factors in. You have to remember, when you guys are watching these, all that factors in. It's not cookie cutter, and there's a lot of factors that go into each one. And one of the big factors is here, and I say it whenever we have a quality offensive lineman, there's just not a lot of them. The good Lord didn't make a ton of big human beings, like that,
That are
especially
nasty and can
yeah,
bend and
that and that are and that young, where he has so much upside and so much room for growth, so all that
yeah.
factored in. But I feel comfortable with him targeting those divisions right now, simply because of his tape that he has now. He has good tape now, and I think those divisions will absolutely be intrigued, right now by what they see. But also, getting some traction, even if it's Division II FCS, heading into his sophomore year, where some of those coaches already have an eye on him, and getting some major momentum. You know what I mean? Going into his senior year, obviously, because I have no doubt that the tape will get better, next year. And having said that, what he needs to do, you know what I mean, for that to happen, and for him to, possibly be talking about a different evaluation next year, one is he's going to have to make sure he controls the size he has now. He can't get too big either. You know what I mean? Some guys are always focused on, I got to get bigger to play college ball. I got to get bigger, this, that, and other. The size he is right now, if he really works hard in the weight room and trims it out, you know what I mean? And I mean, they wouldn't be mad at him, you know what I mean, if he got down to 285, 290 probably, you know what I mean, and just got a lot of power and, you know what I mean, kept his athleticism and all those things and showed up at that size, they'd probably be ecstatic, wherever he went, at that position. So he's got to do a good job of not getting too big as well, because he's obviously a big man at that age. So he's got to do that. He's got to. This is one of the few that we're going to talk about. That we've talked about with weight control versus putting on weight. He needs to do a nice job with that. We talked about it, but he really needs to make sure he can bend well. So the stretching is going to be huge. The flexibility is going to be huge. He needs to really, really focus on that this off season. And
Lots
then
of stretch.
lastly, yeah, lots of stretching, flexibility, and being able to bend at every angle. And then the last one is, just continue to increase his power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When a kid that size, what they're looking for at, if you're talking about leveling up into the higher level of Division 1s, if you're that size, and now and I'm talking about like if they're watching it next year, because we're talking about, what he needs to do to level up. If you're that size and they're watching it as a junior, like you need to be, you need to be overpowering people once you engage, in a block,
Right.
especially if you're in the box. Now, if you're out on the perimeter running around, that's different. But any time in the run game, or any time you're within, 3 or 4 yards of somebody, you need to, once you get locked on, you need to be overpowering them. And if he does all those things, all those things go together to be able to do those things. You got to be able to
Right.
bend, have good pad level. If you got good power and you're working hard in the weight room, you can overcome them with power. So if those things really keep stand out on tape next year, combined with the athleticism he already has, and like we said, the size, keep the size under control, And typically the nastiness doesn't go backwards. Typically, if they have it, it stays with them. And from my experience, all the way through high school, because that's just who they are.
Yeah.
If you see those things next year, this time we may be, talking about a whole different, level of evaluation.
Yeah. And some ways, like just some thoughts on like the power is like really, really working on those cleans, really exploding through the hips. And as far as, the weight control, I think this is really important. A lot of people just step on a scale, but what I would highly recommend, you can get them for really inexpensive, is to make sure your scale not only tells you your weight, but it also tells you your body fat percentage so that you're looking at both, right? So we're not getting out of control because you could stay at 300 pounds, but decrease your body fat percentage by 6, 7 points and at the same time gain a lot of muscle and be at the same weight. And so for him, it seems like that's probably going to be a good option for him. So just a little suggestion there. Anything else, Brian, that you want to add?
No, I think we hit on all of it. I like this kid. He's a really good young player. I think if he focuses on those things we talked about and keep adding to the traits he already has on tape, like I said, that's a solid sophomore tape for a young player, especially at O-line. I think he's got a bright future.
Yeah, 100%. And so, um, you know, if you're the parent of a high school football player and you'd like to see what level your son has the best chance of getting a scholarship in right now, and again, all of this we're saying is with the assumption that your son's doing everything that we teach, right? The marketing side, the posting, the social media, the outreach, to these coaches, all of that matters. But the reason we evaluate highlight videos is because if you're not reaching out to the right divisions and the right schools, everything else we teach won't work, right? So this is the first and most important piece. And so if you'd like to see if your son meets the criteria for professional evaluation to make sure he's targeting the right schools, we'll leave a link in the description below. Interesting stat, only 21% of our viewers are actually subscribers. So if you'd like to continue to watch more content like this, we post an evaluation every Saturday morning, a podcast every Monday afternoon, as well as a YouTube, how-to/coaching video every Wednesday afternoon. If you'd like to be able to see those as they come out, consider subscribing. You can hit the subscription button below, as well as the bell notification. If not, we'll see you on the next one.